It was nearly 2 a.m. when the old grandfather clock echoed through the marble halls of the Duval estate, its chime cutting through the suffocating silence like a whisper of the past. The mansion, once alive with laughter and music, now stood still, haunted not by ghosts, but by memories. William Duval, a billionaire wrapped in solitude and habit, moved quietly through his home, barefoot on cold floors, seeking nothing more than a glass of water and a moment of peace from the insomnia that had become his only true companion. But what he found in the kitchen stopped him cold. Under the soft hum of a flickering light, a figure sat hunched over the counter, his maid, Anna, not cleaning, not resting, but surrounded by thick textbooks, scribbled notes, and pages filled with diagrams of the human body. Her uniform sleeves were rolled up, her hair tied back, and a pencil was tucked behind one ear like a student deep in final season. She was completely absorbed in her work, mouthing unfamiliar medical terms under her breath. William watched in silence, bewildered. Why would a maid be studying advanced biology at 2 a.m? Then she looked up, startled. Her eyes widened in panic as she scrambled to hide the books. But it was too late. The truth, unexpected and raw, lay open on the countertop. Anna was studying to become a doctor, and in that moment, William Duval saw her not as a girl who dusted his furniture and folded his clothes, but as something else entirely. Someone burning with determination, fighting for a dream no one had given her permission to have. A girl with no time, no money, no support, and yet still daring to believe in something more. He had millions in his bank account, but she had something he hadn't felt in years: fire. What happens when a man with everything to give meets a woman with everything to prove? That night, beneath the soft yellow glow of a kitchen lamp, two paths crossed in silence. And without either of them knowing, a single midnight encounter would unravel past wounds, spark a buried hope, and ignite a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. The air was thick with stillness as William Duval stood frozen in the doorway, the cool marble pressing against his bare feet. Across the kitchen, Anna's face flushed with embarrassment, her hands trembling slightly as she closed a heavy textbook, as if she could tuck her secret away like a folded napkin. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice breaking the quiet like glass shattering on the floor. "I didn't think anyone would be awake." William didn't move. He wasn't sure what surprised him more, the fact that his maid was awake at this hour, or the fact that she was cramming complex medical terms into a worn spiral notebook instead of sleeping like everyone else in the house. He cleared his throat, soft but firm. "What are you doing, Anna?" She hesitated, her eyes dropping to the cold marble beneath her. "Studying, sir," she whispered. "I have an exam tomorrow, a placement test for an online course." Her voice was barely audible, but it carried the weight of something far heavier than schoolwork. A flicker of curiosity tugged at William's guarded heart. "You're taking classes?" She nodded, nervously tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Only at night. I can't afford proper school yet, but if I pass this test, I might qualify for remote courses." William's eyes dropped to the textbook in front of her, Advanced Human Biology, a book that didn't belong in the hands of a maid scrubbing marble floors for a living. "What do you want to be?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop himself. Anna's gaze lifted then, and for the first time, William saw something fierce flickering behind her usually downcast eyes. "A doctor," she said, steady now, her voice slicing through the silence. "A doctor." The word lingered in the air between them like an unanswered prayer. For a moment, William said nothing. He simply looked at her, really looked, at the girl who served tea without complaint, who mopped his floors without fanfare, who now stood in front of him carrying the weight of a dream no one in this mansion had ever bothered to notice. "You're tired," he murmured quietly. "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "But you're still studying." "Yes." He gave a slow nod, almost to himself. Then, without another word, he turned back toward the door, pausing only once to glance over his shoulder. "Don't let me stop you." And just like that, a thread was tied between them, fragile, unspoken, but unbreakable. By the time the world stirred awake, Anna had already been moving for hours. At 5 a.m., while the sky was still ink black and the state still asleep, she was in the kitchen, measuring flour with precision, folding linens with care, organizing cabinets like it mattered. No one saw her begin. No one noticed how quietly she worked. But that was the rhythm of her life. Invisible, necessary, forgotten. By mid-morning, she swept the long marble hallways, her steps light, her thoughts heavier. She polished brass doorknobs that no one thanked her for. She scrubbed away fingerprints from mirrors she never looked into. And in rooms where she wasn't welcome to sit, she dusted the bookshelves like a librarian of someone else's life. Anna never paused, not out of obligation, but out of discipline. Because when night came, that's when her real work began. She'd retreat to her small room tucked near the laundry, a space so modest the bed creaked with every breath, the walls too thin to hold secrets. Her desk was nothing more than a salvaged plank of wood balanced on crates. The lamp flickered when the air conditioner kicked in. Still, she sat there every night, tired, aching eyes heavy but mind alert. Her textbooks were secondhand, their pages stained with use and hope. Her notes were scribbled on scraps, the backs of receipts, napkins from lunch breaks, even the margins of old grocery lists. The internet lagged, buffering just when she needed it most, but she never cursed it. She didn't have the luxury of frustration, because somewhere back in Florida, her younger sister was texting her goodnight. Her mother, pale and thinner each week, still needed medicine. Her little brother sent her drawings, stick figures of her wearing a white coat, a stethoscope, and a cape. "My sister is a superhero," he had scrawled in shaky handwriting. That was why Anna studied. Not for fame, not for wealth, but for the sick father who had died on a bamboo cot when there was no clinic, for the mothers who waited too long to give birth, for the children whose illnesses were dismissed because they were poor. They told her girls like her didn't become doctors. Brown-skinned, broke, a housemaid in a foreign land. But Anna didn't argue. She just worked. And William, he watched, from a distance at first, quietly, but something in the way she moved, like the world deserved gentleness, made it impossible not to notice. She touched every surface like it mattered. And maybe, just maybe, it did. Because Anna was building something. Not just a future. A revolution, one whispered prayer at a time. At first, William didn't understand why he kept thinking about her. He had always maintained a respectful distance from his staff, cordial but detached. That was the unspoken rule in houses like his. But ever since that night in the kitchen, something had shifted. He began to notice her more. No, see her. He watched how Anna trimmed the hydrangeas in the back garden, her movements gentle, like each flower held a secret worth preserving. He saw how she wrapped a dish towel around the kettle handle, so the cook wouldn't burn his hand. How she noticed when the butler looked pale and left a bowl of warm soup outside his door. No name, no note, just kindness. She didn't speak much, but in the silence, she said everything. It was never performance. It was instinct. The kind of awareness no one teaches and few possess. One evening, as William sat on the terrace with a cup of black tea and a heart still sore with old grief, he saw her return from the market. She carried 2 bags, her small frame weighed down, but she paused beside the gardener, who was kneeling in pain. "You said your knees hurt," she said softly, slipping a small box of balm into his hand. Then she disappeared inside. William didn't speak, but something stirred deep in his chest, something he had long buried. The next evening, he found her again, sitting by the service hallway, books spread across her lap, the light from the corridor barely reaching her pages. When she saw him, she scrambled to stand. "No need," he said gently. "Mind if I join you?" She blinked, surprised. "Here." "I like the quiet," he replied, easing into the chair across from her. She hesitated, then nodded. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Then softly, as if afraid to disrupt the peace, he asked, "Do you miss Florida?" A beat. Then, without looking up, she said, "Every day." "Why don't you go back?" Her pencil stopped moving. "Because everything I need to become is still here." That night, they said little, but something passed between them, a thread of understanding that required no explanation, a mutual recognition, not of roles, not of status, but quiet endurance. And a few nights later, when he handed her a cup of coffee and said, This one's sweet. I wasn't sure how you take it, she smiled. Sweet is good. Thank you. The change didn't happen all at once. It unfolded in quiet gestures and late-night coffees and lingering conversations. In the stillness they share without needing to fill the silence. William found himself waiting for those evenings. Some nights, they spoke of science, Anna's fascination with human anatomy, with healing. Other nights, they shared memories. Her father's final days in a rural village, his late wife's laughter echoing through an empty piano room. Two lives from different worlds, stitched together by grief, by resilience, by something neither had dared name. And then one morning, William made a decision. He sat in his home office, the morning sun spilling across dusty bookshelves and business reports he no longer cared to read. He picked up the phone, one number, one name. Dr. Patel, he said, I need a favor. A week later, Anna was called to the library. Not the kitchen, not the hallway, but the room where staff were rarely summoned. She entered hesitantly, wiping flour from her hands, her heart pounding like she'd done something wrong. Sir, she asked, voice soft. William didn't look up right away. Instead, he placed a folder gently on the desk and gestured for her to sit. There's a hospital I've worked with for years, he began. They run a Saturday outreach program. I've arranged for you to assist as a volunteer. Anna blinked. Volunteer? In a real hospital? He nodded. You'll shadow nurses, help with non-critical patients, observe. It's not much, but it's real. Think of it as practice. Her throat tightened. I don't know what to say. Then don't, he said, finally looking at her. Just go, learn, become. That Saturday, Anna stepped through the glass doors of the city hospital, heart racing, hands trembling slightly as she clutched a notepad and wore her cleanest shirt. She was introduced to Claudia, a no-nonsense nurse with sharp eyes and a kind heart. Anna was assigned to the outpatient clinic, taking blood pressure, filling forms for elderly patients, soothing crying children, cleaning stretchers between visits. She moved with humility, but with unmistakable purpose. By the end of the day, Claudia pulled her aside. You said this was your first time? Anna nodded. Claudia studied her. You have better bedside instincts than some of our interns. I just try to help like I'd want someone to help my family, Anna replied, almost apologetically. Claudia's look softened. Come back next week. Same time. Anna smiled, wide and real, the kind of smile that felt like the first sunrise after a storm. And back at the mansion that evening, a cup of tea waited quietly outside her door. No note, no words, just belief in its simplest, most powerful form. Weeks passed. Saturdays became Anna's favorite day, even though they left her exhausted. Every week, she returned to that bustling city hospital, not as a maid, not as an outsider, but as a learner, an observer, a quiet helper. And every Saturday night, without fail, William would leave a warm cup of tea outside her door. No questions, no conditions. Just silent, steadfast support. But what Anna didn't know was that behind the calm of those Saturday teas, William had been making other arrangements. One Thursday afternoon, she was summoned again to the library. Her heart raced as she stepped inside, wondering what she had done. On the desk in front of William lay a folder, the same kind he used for business contracts, but this one bore her name. Is something wrong? She asked carefully. William gestured to the chair. No, quite the opposite. She sat, her hands folded nervously in her lap. He slid the folder across the polished desk. Open it. Anna's fingers trembled as she lifted the cover. Inside was an official letter embossed in gold, her name printed in bold at the top. It took her a moment to process the words. A full scholarship to a 2-year pre-medical certificate program, with a guaranteed pathway into medical school upon completion. Her breath caught. I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't apply for this. You didn't need to, William said quietly. I did. Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head, confused. Why? Why would you do this? William leaned forward, his gaze steady. Because I see you. I see who you are and who you're becoming. Anna's throat tightened as she tried to find her voice. "I'm just a maid," she murmured, almost ashamed to speak it aloud. "No," he said gently. "You're not. You're a future doctor. You're someone who works harder than anyone I know. Someone who studies when the world is sleeping, who sends every penny back home, who carries the weight of everyone else's survival on her back. You're someone the world keeps overlooking, but not me." Anna covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. For so long, she fought in silence, never daring to ask for help. And now, someone was offering her everything she had dreamed of, without her ever having asked. "This isn't charity," William added softly. "This is belief." That night, Anna sat in her small room, the acceptance letter folded carefully in her hands. She read and reread it until the words blurred through her tears. For the first time in her life, a door had opened, not because of luck, not because of pity, but because someone had seen her and finally believed she belonged. The letter stayed on Anna's nightstand for days, folded and unfolded, so many times the edges began to wear thin. She read it every night before bed, tracing her name at the top with her fingertip, whispering the words like a prayer she couldn't believe had been answered. But with every reread, her chest grew heavier, because behind the golden seal and promises of a future was a cruel question she couldn't silence. What about them? Her family depended on her. The money she sent home every month paid for her mother's medicine, kept her siblings in school, kept food on their table. If she left this job, if she chased this dream, who would hold them up? One morning, before the sun had fully risen, Anna knocked on the conservatory door, the letter clutched tightly in her trembling hands. William looked up from his tea, sensing the storm in her eyes. I don't think I can go," she said quietly, voice cracking around the edges. He frowned. "Why?" Her fingers tightened around the paper. "My family, my mother's medication, my siblings' tuition. If I stop working, they'll have nothing. I can't be selfish." William set down his cup, leaned back, and studied her like a man seeing someone drowning in their own goodness. "Anna," he said gently, "what you call selfish, I call brave." She shook her head, her shoulders tense, her throat thick. "They need me more than the world needs another doctor." He stood, slowly walked over to her. Then, without a word, he placed his hand over hers, the one still gripping the acceptance letter, like it might vanish. "You've spent your entire life giving," he said quietly. "I admire that. But if you give up your dream to survive, you'll keep surviving and never truly live." Anna's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. No one had ever seen her sacrifice and called it bravery. She sank into the chair across from him, her defenses crumbling. "I'm scared," she whispered. William nodded once. "I know. That's how you know it's worth it." For a long moment, neither spoke. They just sat there in the morning light. The billionaire who had everything but felt empty, and the maid who had nothing but carried a dream bigger than herself. Finally, Anna looked up, her eyes clear despite the tears. "I'll do it," she said. William exhaled, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. Then the world just got luckier. And that night, as she packed her worn clothes and battered textbooks, Anna didn't feel like she was leaving something behind. She felt, for the first time, like she was stepping toward herself. The first day Anna stepped onto campus, she felt like an imposter. Students poured out of sleek black cars, wearing designer jackets and carrying tablets tucked under their arms. Their conversations floated around her about summer vacations, private tutors, and family legacies. And there she stood, clutching a second-hand backpack, her scholarship idea like a shield against a world that had never been built for someone like her. In her first lecture hall, she sat in the back row, quiet and invisible. When the professor made jokes, she didn't laugh. When students debated loudly, she stayed silent. She had no room for small talk. Every breath, every second belonged to her purpose. At night, she studied alone, exactly like she used to. Flashcards spread across her narrow dorm desk. Medical terms whispered into the dark. Old habits carried over from a maid's bedroom near the laundry room of a mansion. But here, the stakes were different. Here, she wasn't cleaning floors between study sessions. She wasn't checking her phone at midnight to see if her mother had taken her medication or if her brother had passed his math test. Here, she was chasing a dream full time, and it terrified her. But she didn't stop. Slowly, something began to change. During one difficult case study, the class hesitated. No one had the answer. Anna raised her hand, voice soft but certain. "The symptoms match a variant of Job syndrome," she said. "It was in the immunology reading last week." The room fell silent. The professor smiled. "That's correct." And just like that, the whispers around her shifted. From indifference to curiosity, they began to ask her questions. Who was she? Where had she learned to think like that? Anna never offered long answers. She just kept showing up, first to arrive, last to leave, her notebooks filling with knowledge and fire. But no matter how far she went, she never forgot the man who had opened the door. Every month, without fail, she wrote to William. Not emails, letters, handwritten on lined paper, folded neatly, tucked into stamped envelopes like small offerings of gratitude. She told him about her classes, her professors, her small victories. The first time she sutured a wound, the first time she aced a pharmacology exam. She thanked him every time, never asking for anything more. William never replied. But every night, after reading her letters, he pinned them one by one on a corkboard in his study. Each letter, a reminder that even in the silence of his grand, empty house, something good was growing out there in the world. Something he had quietly, stubbornly dared to believe in. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as the car slowly pulled into the long, winding driveway. Ivy still curled around the white columns of the Duval estate. The windows gleamed in the afternoon sun, just as they always had. The roses in the garden were still in bloom, unchanged. But the woman stepping out of the car was not the same girl who had once walked these grounds with a mop in her hand and second-hand shoes on her feet. Anna stood still for a moment, her blazer neat, her white coat folded carefully over her arm. She took a deep breath, the air oddly familiar and distant all at once. For years had passed. For years since she had scrubbed these marble floors, folded the linens, brewed tea at dawn, and studied anatomy by a flickering desk lamp. For years of lectures, labs, exams, and long nights in sterile hospitals where she fought for every answer, every breakthrough, every single piece of her dream. Now she had returned, not as a maid, but as Dr. Anna Santos. She rang the doorbell with trembling fingers. It opened slowly. William stood in the doorway, older now. The lines around his eyes had deepened, and his silver hair was thinner, but his gaze, steady, warm, and watchful, was the same. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled. "Anna," he said softly. She smiled back, eyes misting over. "Hello, Mr. Duval." "No more, sir," he said gently. She laughed, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Not today." He stepped aside, and she entered the house, the same house she once cleaned from top to bottom. But today, she didn't see it as a place of labor. She saw it as a silent witness to everything she had become. They walked together through the familiar hallway and into the conservatory. The light poured through the windows just as it always had. William poured tea for her without asking, just like he used to, and handed her a cup. They sat together in quiet comfort. The years between them melted into something soft, something steady. "I kept all your letters," William said suddenly, his voice low. "They're still on the wall." Anna looked up, surprised. "When the house feels too quiet, I read them again." Her throat tightened. "I never knew if you read them." He chuckled. "Every single one. Twice." She reached across the table, placed her hand over his. "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't have made it without your belief." But William shook his head slowly. "You made it," he said, "because you refused not to." They smiled then, not as billionaire and maid, not as benefactor and recipient, but as something else entirely. As two people who had quietly and against the odds changed each other's lives forever. The auditorium was filled to the brim, family members beaming with pride, friends holding flowers, professors straightening their gowns, and camera flashes bouncing off the polished floors. It was a day of celebration, of endings and new beginnings. At the center of the stage stood Anna. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. Her black gown hung perfectly, but the real crown was the white coat draped proudly over her shoulders. Stitched just above the heart in clean black thread was her name, Dr. Anna Santos. She looked out over the sea of faces and spotted him. William sat quietly in the back row, away from the noise and cameras, not clapping, not waving, just smiling. That familiar, steady smile that had once waited for her outside a laundry room door in the form of a warm cup of tea. Anna took a breath, her heart full, not of fear, but of something deeper, something stronger, certainty. I wasn't born into a life of opportunity, she began, her voice calm but resonant. I was born into a small home where dreams were often too expensive to afford. I grew up watching illness take away the people I loved, not because there weren't cures, but because we couldn't reach them. The room fell completely still. And for a long time, she continued, I thought surviving was all I could ever hope for. But then one day, someone saw me, not for what I did or where I came from, but for what I could become. She paused, scanning the crowd. Her eyes locked on William. There was a man who saw me not as a maid, but as a story waiting to be told. And he gave me the one thing that can't be bought, belief. A soft murmur rippled through the audience. But Anna didn't flinch. That belief changed everything. And now I stand here not just as a doctor, but as proof that kindness can be the seed of something extraordinary. The standing ovation was thunderous. People rose to their feet. Applause echoed against the high ceilings. But Anna didn't hear any of it. She was already looking toward the back of the room, where William sat unmoving, except for that smile. A smile that spoke 1,000 words. A smile that said, I knew you would. And in that moment, Anna didn't feel like a former maid. She didn't feel like an outsider. She felt exactly what she was. A healer, a force, a woman who had turned struggle into strength. And somewhere in the silence of that applause, a quiet chapter had closed. Not with a bow, not with fanfare, but with the simple, profound truth she had arrived. Months later, in a quiet corner of Queens, a new kind of clinic opened its doors. Not one backed by billionaires with their names on golden plaques, but by someone who once scrubbed hospital beds and dreamed under dim lights. Anna called it Project Hewaga, a Tagalog word meaning wonder, a tribute not just to miracles, but to the wonder of what could happen when someone dares to believe. Not just in healing, but in hope. It wasn't glamorous. 5 small rooms, a waiting area with folding chairs, a mural on the side wall painted by neighborhood kids, bright sun stethoscopes, stick figures with capes and lab coats. Her staff was small, her budget even smaller, but the doors never closed. She offered free checkups to undocumented families who were afraid to go anywhere else, prenatal care to mothers who had been ignored, vaccines for children who had slipped through the cracks. She didn't wear her white coat like armor. She wore it like a promise. No donor names were listed on the building, but Anna knew. She knew that the medical equipment had been quietly paid for, the rent covered month after month, by someone who never once asked for recognition. William. He never came to ribbon cuttings, never asked for photos, never even signed the checks with his name. He simply gave quietly the way he always had. But one crisp autumn afternoon, near closing time, Anna invited him. He arrived in a modest coat, walking slower now, his frame a little thinner, but his eyes still carrying that familiar gaze, the one that saw more than what was on the surface. They sat on a bench outside the clinic as the sun dipped low behind the rooftops. Children played with sidewalk chalk nearby, drawing bright galaxies on concrete. Neither spoke for a while. Then Anna said softly, "They think the building is magic." William raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" She smiled. "In a way. It was built on something stronger than concrete." He looked at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he reached for her hand and held it. Just for a moment. No speeches. No drama. Just stillness. And in his eyes, Anna saw everything she needed to know. That he had never stopped believing in her. That he had never wanted anything in return. That maybe, just maybe, love doesn't always need to be spoken aloud to be real. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder as the chalk drawings glowed in the sunset and the mural caught fire in golden light. Two people, one strangers in a kitchen lit by a flickering bulb, now sitting side by side, quietly witnessing the life they had built. Not in grand gestures, but in steadfast belief. Because some stories don't end in love. Some stories begin with it and simply keep growing. And so, my friends, that's how the story of a billionaire and a maid became something far greater than wealth, titles, or status. It became a story about how one quiet act of belief can change the course of a life. And not just one life, but many. You see, this wasn't just Anna's story. It was a reminder to all of us that sometimes the people we overlook, the ones who move silently in the background, are carrying dreams bigger than we can imagine. Dreams they're willing to fight for when no one's watching. It's easy to think we need money, power, or privilege to make a difference. But the truth is, what changes the world is kindness. A hand extended when no one else is looking. A voice that says, "I see you. I believe in you." William didn't change Anna's life because he was rich. He changed it because he chose to believe in her. And in doing so, he found something he'd lost long ago, a reason to hope again. So maybe today, you'll remember this story the next time you meet someone quietly fighting their own battle. And maybe, just maybe, you'll choose to believe in them too. Thank you so much for staying with us through this powerful journey. If this story touched your heart, inspired you, or made you see the world a little differently, don't forget to like, share, and comment below to let us know what you felt. And if you want more real-life stories of hope, resilience, and the unexpected beauty of human connection, make sure to subscribe to Mr. Michael Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Until next time, keep believing in others and in yourself.